Good afternoon, everyone. This is the second session of today, and welcome to the session on defining hate speech, different perspective and context. At the end of the previous session, İnanç Hoca mentioned a discussion between the team. He said that sometimes we were talking about if it is hate speech or not, and sometimes I was thinking that it's not hate speech. So with this session, we will try to clarify a little bit what is hate speech, but this is not an easy task, in fact. You will see that there are a lot of possible definitions. And in an era of growing polarization and regressive policies, unfortunately, in an era where discriminatory rhetoric is increasingly voiced by state officials, discussing hate speech becomes even more crucial. And as I mentioned before, there are various definitions of hate speech and alternative concepts that could be used in its place, but not only. However, regardless of the terminology we choose, we unfortunately see that such rhetoric has real and harmful consequences in people's lives. Therefore, the ways in which we combat hate speech are becoming more important than ever. Just like in today's first session and during the coffee break, tomorrow's discussions will also focus on these solutions. In this session, we will explore how different frameworks, from legal definitions to media narratives and artificial intelligence-driven technologies, approach hate speech. We will also examine how these definitions influence policymaking, alternative digital solutions, and broader anti-discrimination efforts. Each speaker has 15 minutes for their representation, and I will give a reminder when there are 5 minutes left, and it's the least pleasant part of being a moderator, sorry. The reality is that this topic almost never fits neatly into a 15-minute window, but I hope we can address any gaps during the question and answer session. So I look forward to an engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Before handing the floor over to Susan Benesch, I'd like to share a brief introduction about her. She's from Berkman Klein Center, and she coined the term dangerous speech. It's an important concept in this area. And she founded, and she still directs, the Dangerous Speech Project to study speech that can inspire violence and to find ways to prevent this. Her research has been instrumental in shaping strategies to contract hate speech while preserving democratic values, and I think those are the two key concepts, contract hate speech and preserving democratic values. So the floor is yours, Susan.
Thank you so much. I am delighted and grateful to join such a brilliant panel and to be invited by the Randing Foundation to do almost anything and to offer some ideas to you. We've been invited to examine varying definitions of hate speech, so I'll do that, focusing especially on the boundaries between what is hate speech and what is not hate speech, and how definitions attempt to draw and clarify those boundaries. That can be more difficult than it may seem at first glance, and sadly in the United States we are now being dragged through a time that presents these questions more acutely than in recent memory. So also another a very important reason why these questions of the margins or boundaries have become more important are in fact relevant for you and for people almost all over the world, because as you know, companies such as Meta and Twitter, now X, have recently bowed out of regulating speech at the margins. Instead, they take down only the most egregious, extreme, and obvious hate speech and other harmful content, sometimes including dangerous speech, And they are effectively leaving the rest of content moderation up to the rest of all of us, that is to say, the users of social media platforms. X, as it's now called, has been doing this, that is to say, abdicating a lot of what we previously considered their responsibility to moderate content, since not long after Musk took over Twitter and fired 75% of the staff, including content moderators. X used and still uses a system called community notes, in which the platform's users are invited to annotate content with which they disagree. It is essentially a way of leaving the work of fact-checking and denouncing hatred up to volunteers who offer to do it for free, by the way. Since Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, the chief executive of Meta, formerly Facebook, announced in the beginning of January that Meta would dismantle its own third-party fact-checking system, at least in the United States, and greatly diminish content moderation. Meta is now pushing very hard to develop systems like community notes for its own platforms. In other words, Meta, which, as you know, owns many widely used and important platforms, is also effectively bowing out of much content moderation and other social media. This has opened the door for other social media platforms to act similarly. So that's a very major shift regarding what's happening on social media around the world. Then we should mention other platforms like WhatsApp that are not formally social media, but that function like social media and that are almost entirely unmoderated. So what I'm trying to suggest to you is that this job of deciding what is and isn't hate speech and how to respond to it has now effectively been dumped in all of our laps to a large extent. So now fitting hate speech definitions to the situation in which we are living, offline and online, is a big challenge. And for that, I'd like to mention a concept called the Overton window. There was a researcher called Charles Overton who said that speech norms, discourse norms, in other words, what it is and is not acceptable to say, these norms can be envisioned with a window. And his idea was that at any given time in a society, there are certain statements that are considered generally acceptable by the influential people in a group, and we can think of those as being inside the window, and if you can imagine an actual window frame, and then things you should not say by consensus are outside the window, and his basic point was that the window moves around. We are seeing the window moving rapidly now, and this is another very important point, I think, for defining hate speech, since, of course, that definition cannot be static. Like the window, it moves around. Also in January, Meta made some specific changes to its hate speech policies that I'd like to point out, and then I'll offer you a couple of hate speech definitions, and then I think my time will be up. And we can discuss more in the question and answer. At Meta, it is no longer hate speech, for example, to use insulting or exclusionary language when discussing transgender rights, immigration, or homosexuality, or to make allegations of mental illness or abnormality when based on gender or sexual orientation. I noticed during our first brilliant panel this morning that those sorts of comments, I believe, would be quickly and easily identified by the automated tool as hate speech. However, Meta has now shifted its own rules so that such statements are not considered hate speech by Meta and would not be taken down. And the justification that Mark Zuckerberg gave was protecting freedom of expression. In other words, such statements are being widely made, and he wasn't as clear as this, but I know from talking with Meta staff that the idea is that people are already having such discussions on and offline, and some of them are not at least intended as hateful by the people who are discussing. Of course, many are. But this raises some important questions. Do you define hate speech by the intention of the person speaking, or by the feeling of members of the targeted group? I suppose this morning the definition being used is based on the feelings of the target group, not the intention of the speaker. But there is still surely some room for debate about how to draw those lines. So indeed, Meta explained that it did this to allow what it calls political and religious discourse. Or to put it the way staff at another social media platform did in a conversation I was part of a week ago, how can we ban what politicians are saying in public, or what is printed in an executive order signed by the US president? Recently, Donald Trump signed an order that declares that in the United States there are only two sexes, male and female, and that there is no such thing as a transgender person. That is now official United States policy. And so the question that the staff of the social media platform was asking is, so should we take down as hate speech the text of an executive order signed by the president or not? This is not exactly a definitional question. It's maybe a policy question, but surely really quite an important one. So I will ask you, does a social media platform have to catch up with the political culture or with social discourse or with the government or not? And the same thing, of course, with hate speech definitions as we make them. Particularly in my country, different people and different groups would now define hate speech extremely differently from each other. So if we want those people to be able to talk to each other, this will perhaps raise some definitional questions. Now, I promised to talk quickly about two hate speech definitions. I think I have 5 minutes left. To make this more tangible and more tied to real hate speech definitions, I'd like to offer two of those from the United Nations and from Meta itself, and call your attention to two key issues in them, both of which are highly relevant at the moment. The first issue is, how bad does hate speech have to be? Or what sort of attack counts? What sort of attack or criticism or description of members of another human group is bad enough to constitute hate speech? And as you'll see, the definitions vary on this. And the second issue, very important, is which groups count? This is based on the fact that hate speech, in all definitions that I know of, is always defined as an attack on a member or members of a particular type of human group, not just any group. Every definition specifies groups that count and groups that don't count, or in the case of the UN definition, there's a little sort of slippery exit, but the definition at least describes the kind of group that counts. So there are certainly some groups that get attacked frequently with what would otherwise constitute hate speech, but it doesn't count because it isn't the right kind of group. That has been a very challenging issue for social media platforms. They began 10 years ago basing the types of groups on international human rights law as it emerged from World War II with the what I think of as the traditional kinds of groups. Ethnicity was one of the bases, religion, of course, nationality, but famously political opinion doesn't count. And so that is not the kind of group that counts. Different social media platforms have in the intervening years added other sorts of groups. So, for example, immigrant status counts for hate speech under some platforms' definitions, but not others. Caste, as you will see, was added by Meta, for which India is the largest market in the world. And veteran status has been added by some platforms, but not others. Now let me give you the definitions quickly. I can't go on without telling you that I love to explain this point about hate speech definitions by pointing out that when a child tells her mother, "I hate you," that's not hate speech. Since no matter how emphatic it is, I can tell you as a mother, since it is directed at the mother as an individual, it's a very personal sentiment, and she is not there being attacked as a member of any group, so it is definitely not hate speech. Now, the UN Strategy and Plan of Action on Hate Speech defines hate speech as any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of who they are. In other words, based on their, notice the groups, religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, that's all the traditional ones. And now we go slightly elsewhere. Color, descent, gender, or other identity factor. Or other identity factor is that sort of slippery slope that I mentioned to you. I want to point out that pejorative is a very big category. Pejorative roughly means bad. So if you take this definition strictly, you would count as hate speech almost any remark that is bad about members of a group described here. So I have worried quite a lot about that word in the definition, since under it would be possible to make statements that, in my view, are not hateful about members of another group, but we can discuss it. Okay. Meta's definition. We define hate speech as a direct attack, which in various ways is much narrower, against people based on our protected characteristics. Race, ethnicity, national origin. So that's the traditional groups. But now listen to these. Disability, religious affiliation, caste, sexual orientation, sex, gender identity, and disease. Another important one. But not immigrant status, for immigration status, not age, not veteran status, and a number of others that could be included. So I will just conclude by pointing out to you that there are a lot of very vicious and frightening attacks on people who are members of groups that don't count under either of these two definitions. For example, after on December 4th of last year, Brian Thompson, the chief executive officer of a large US health insurance company, was murdered, probably by Luigi Mangione, although of course he's innocent until proven guilty. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people celebrated that murder online and called for much more. For example, right now there is still a post up on Facebook in which somebody posted in December, shortly after the murder, well, there are 17 days left of Advent. Those are the days in which Christians count down to Christmas and do various things to celebrate. Usually for Advent, you open little boxes on a calendar and take out presents. And so this person posted, maybe we could get another 17 insurance company executives between now and Christmas time. That would be great. This is an open call for multiple murders, right? Mm-hmm. it's still there. Why? Because Brian Thompson was not a member of a protected group. Of course, health insurance company executives are very far from marginalized. However, again, if they did constitute a protected group, then there has been an absolute ocean of hate speech against that group. Of course, many of those people were, in calling for more murders, and by the way, in turning Mangione, the guy accused of the murder, into such a folk hero that he recently made a public request that people stop sending him so many presents in jail. Apparently he can only have 5 books at a time, and his enormous army of supporters and admirers have sort of buried the jail in presents for him. All of the calls for more murders certainly constitute dangerous speech, but interestingly, they don't constitute hate speech. And the last thing, I'll close with this, that I want to point out to you that is so, in my view, difficult and calls us to struggle with definitional questions, is that in the United States, we don't have any national health system. And whether someone gets life-saving medical care very often depends on the will of the insurance company, whether it will be approved or not approved. So there are, unfortunately, tragically, large numbers of Americans who have literally watched their family members die because of the profit-maximizing decisions of people like Brian Thompson, may he rest in peace. And so, since everyone should. So these people who expressed hate speech but not hate speech were also expressing their passionate grief and rage against a system that is, almost without any question, cruel and unjust. So I will leave you with, what I'm trying to do is hand you a problem. And maybe you would please solve it for me. And then I can tell, some of the social media companies that are asking for advice, how to solve these things. But then, I'm sorry, one last thing. Trump in particular, President Trump, attacks many groups that don't count in the definitions of hate speech, such as journalists. Since we are at the Randink Foundation, a particularly vital group of people in society who are very often attacked, tragically, not only by Donald Trump, but that doesn't count as a group targeted by hate speech, since one's occupation is almost never a kind of identity that counts in definitions of hate speech. Thank you. I will pass it on.
Thank you very much, Susan. I think there are a lot of things, there are a lot of important things in your speech. Especially, I am really surprised by the quick switch of social media companies from being a very liberative and very companies for freedom of speech, and they are now. They changed quickly. Sorry, I think it can be a subject to discuss during the Q&A maybe. And I think that your speech is something that explains really and deeply why we need concepts such as hate speech or dangerous speech, but something different than the classical appellations. Because I know that there are people who criticize the usage of hate speech or dangerous speech by saying that it undervalues, for example, racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, etc. But now, unfortunately, we are living in an area that those are not enough to call, to name that kind of speech, because there are a lot of other groups who had to face hate speech or dangerous speech. So thank you very much. And now we welcome Professor Yasemin İnceoğlu. I had the chance to assist her at Galatasaray University, where she was also the Dean of Communication Faculty. Now she's attached to London School of Economics, and she's a leading scholar in media ethics and hate speech studies. With extensive work on journalism, human rights, and digital media, İnceoğlu has significantly contributed to understanding how hate speech operates within media landscapes and public discourse. So, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear İdil. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here today to discuss an issue at the intersection of law, media, and technology, namely the evolving definitions of hate speech. Far from being a static concept, hate speech is continuously redefined by legal forms, media narratives, and technological advancements. And these shifts not only shape how we understand and how we address harmful rhetoric, but also pose complex challenges for policymakers, regulators, and technologists alike. And legal frameworks for hate speech vary significantly across nations, creating a fragmented regulatory landscape. And for example, Germany, the NetzDG law mandates that social media platforms remove hate speech within 24 hours of receiving a complaint. And on May 12, 2023, Facebook in Berlin removed over 2,000 posts targeting immigrant communities after local authorities and citizens lodged complaints under this law. In contrast, the United States relies on the First Amendment, which protects even harsh language unless it incites imminent violence, and thus content deemed hate speech in Germany might be legally accepted in the United States, highlighting the complexities of enforcing global content regulations. And the regional nuances also influence how hate speech is defined and addressed. Following the 2015 attacks in Paris, French media and policymakers increasingly framed hate speech as a national security threat. And in the weeks after the attacks, in November 2015, several French news outlets, such as Le Monde, reported on the rapid removal of the extremist online content, and they argued could spur further radicalization. Meanwhile, Turkey presents a particularly complex case, as it does not have a dedicated hate speech law, and instead provisions scattered across the Turkish Penal Code, Article 216 and Article 301 are used. I want to give an example about Ümit Özdağ, the leader of the Victory Party, is a politician who advocates anti-immigrant right-wing policies and was also a sponsor of the Silent Invasion, Sessiz İstila documentary, and the nationalist Milli Birlik, the National Unity account, operates with the same logic, and they have reinforced each other. And on March 2023, on March 5, 2023, the nationalist account Milli Birlik used the coded phrase, just as the same named with the documentary, Silent Invasion, to incite xenophobia against the Syrian refugees. And this incident sparked widespread criticism and coordinated online harassment, illustrating the subjectivity and inconsistent application of hate speech provisions in Turkey. The differing legal standards across nations create significant hurdles for global platforms. And when the same piece of content can be removed, as I just gave an example in Berlin, but remain published in New York, policymakers and tech companies are forced to navigate a fragmented regulatory landscape. And beyond legal frameworks, media narratives, of course, play a crucial role in shaping public perceptions of hate speech. And the way media outlets present social issues can determine whether certain rhetoric is normalized or challenged. In mid-2023, debates over transgender participation in sports also were often framed in alarmist terms. For example, in 2023, Fox News anchor Sean Hannity presented transgender athlete policies as an existential threat to the safety and fairness of women's sports. And this segment not only amplified alarmist narratives, but also fueled a wave of derogatory comments and coordinated harassment campaigns against transgender individuals on social media. In highly polarized media environments like Turkey's, hate speech is frequently weaponized during the election cycles. And during the 2023 presidential elections, pro-government outlets repeatedly used unverified claims to scapegoat Syrian refugees for economic and social woes, with reports appearing as early as June 2023. And these narratives are then recycled by political figures to discredit opposition voices and undermining mining the integrity of public discourse. Advances in artificial intelligence have introduced powerful tools to detect hate speech. And even when the language is subtle or coded, on February 14, 2022, Twitter's machine learning system flagged a tweet from the account Real Voice. Although the tweet did not include overt slurs, it employed subtle dog whistle language statistically linked to hate speech targeting African Americans. And the system quarantined the tweet for human review, and upon confirmation of its violation of policy, the tweet was removed. However, these systems are not infallible. On February 3, just last month, 2025, an AI generated deepfake video featuring Scarlett Johansson and other Jewish celebrities went viral, and the video, which embedded anti-Semitic symbols into otherwise innocuous visuals, challenged existing AI detection tools, highlighting that algorithms often trained on Western data sets can struggle with cultural nuances and manipulated media. And such incidents reveal that often sophisticated AI must be complemented by human oversight to ensure context-sensitive moderation. And the same AI technologies are deployed across platforms like Meta, YouTube, and X, Twitter, yet enforcement can vary widely. During the 2016 Rio Summer Olympics, for example, in 2016, Twitter swiftly removed racist tweets targeting a Brazilian athlete after they were reported, showcasing the potential of rapid automated intervention, but also the difficulties in achieving consistent moderation across different cultural contexts. And each platform enforces its own version of hate speech policies, which are continuously updated. This makes uniform policymaking difficult and leaves room for bad actors to exploit loopholes. And addressing these challenges requires an integrated approach, and legal harmonization efforts are necessary to establish international frameworks or standards that balance free speech with the necessity of curbing hate speech. Media literacy initiatives can encourage responsible journalism and educate the audiences of the impact of inflammatory language, helping to counter the amplification of hate speech. And the technological innovation, particularly in AI moderation, must continue evolving through culturally diverse training data sets and enhanced human oversight. So the flagged tweet by Real Voice in February 2022 and the deepfake incident in February 2025, Scarlett Johansson's, both underscore the need for constant refinement of moderation technologies. So, as we all see, to conclude, the definition of hate speech is dynamic and shaped by all these evolving legal norms, media practices, and the technological tools. And the current examples which I just given demonstrate how these sectors interact and sometimes clash as policymakers, regulators, and technologists work together. Our goal must be to create a framework where constructive dialogue replaces divisiveness, ensuring that while freedom of expression is protected, our communities will remain safe and inclusive. Yes, and my last word would be, I mean, I'm sure that all of our common goal is to collaboratively navigate these evolving challenges to build a much more respectful and resilient public sphere. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. I just want to add something about trans. Recently, in United States of America Congress, if I am not wrong, a representative called, for example, a trans person, a trans representative, as Mr. And it created debates, of course. So thank you very much for your contribution. Our next speaker is Tirşe Erbaysal Filibeli from Bahçeşehir University, whose research focuses on post-truth, disinformation, fact-checking, peace journalism, among hate speech, of course. Erbaysal Filibeli examines state and platform-level policies on hate speech.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss the complexities of defining hate speech, particularly in the digital public sphere. Social media platforms are no longer just tools of communication, but powerful institutions that govern the flow of information. Yet, despite their influence, these companies operate with little accountability, dictating policies on hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, and moderation, while constantly shifting their priorities to suit their financial and political interests. It is time to ask, how do we define hate speech when those with the power to moderate it are driven not by democratic values, but by profit and personal influences? I need to talk about the illusion of neutrality, platform neutrality especially. One of the prevailing myths in the discussion about content moderation is that platforms are neutral. However, platforms are not neutral. Right now, as you can see, when you especially observe the politics in the US, when you observe the Elon Musk, they are political players, and they are private entities with immense power over global discourse, and their decisions whether through algorithmic design, policy enforcement, or business strategy, carry real political consequences. Their hate speech policies are not merely about protecting users. Rather, they reflect strategic choices influenced by economic interests, political pressure, and broader corporate priorities. Take Mark Zuckerberg's recent decision to end third-party fact-checking on Meta's platform. So, third-party fact-checking initially introduced in 2016, after the Cambridge Analytica scandal was revealed. It was meant as a measure to combat disinformation, and after all, it was framed as a solution that would allow Meta to distance itself from direct editorial responsibilities, and also it was a very good PR campaign for Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. When Donald Trump was re-elected in 2024, Meta decided to end third-party fact-checking. The title of the speech made by Mark Zuckerberg was "More Speech, Fewer Mistakes." I don't think that it is a coincidence. Its discontinuation in 2024 signals a deeper shift. When fact-checking was first introduced in 2016, it was positioned as a safeguard against disinformation. In 2025, the message was clear, by the way, when they decided to end it. When accountability mechanisms become inconvenient or costly, the costly part especially very important, they discard it. Anyway, Mark Zuckerberg's decision to end third-party fact-checking has further discredited, unfortunately, fact-checking organizations, and leading to an increase in inactive fact-checking bodies. Imagine it. Before the pandemic, all around the world, there were around 2,000-something fact-checking organizations. After the pandemic, I recently did a research in 2020, October. It was around 4,030-something. And on daily basis, it was increasing. Right now, when we check it, we do see that the inactive fact-checking organizations, the number of inactive fact-checking organizations increasing day by day. Because after all, this decision gonna affect them. They're gonna affect especially their independent resources, by the way, money income. So, here we need to think about something else. This move somehow weakens the efforts to combat misinformation at a time when disinformation and the hate speech are deeply intertwined. To effectively reduce the hate speech, we must also address the spread of disinformation, for sure. And because false narratives always fuel, the division, incite violence, and erode democratic discourses. So when it comes to Elon Musk and techno-oligarchs and their vision of free speech, we need to discuss it, for sure. No discussion of platform governance would be complete without addressing Elon Musk, of course. Since purchasing Twitter, Musk has positioned himself as a champion of free speech. As the owner of X and a key advisor to Donald Trump, he has made unpredictable and politically driven decisions, such as reviving extremist accounts while suppressing dissenting voices. His actions are not about protecting free expressions, but about strengthening his personal influence over the digital public sphere. Musk's ownership of Twitter exemplifies the rise of techno-oligarchs, billionaires who accumulate control over the critical communication infrastructures and reshape them in alignment with their political and economic interests. Under Musk's content moderation, policies have grown increasingly inconsistent, showing a clear tendency to accommodate state actors and authoritarian governments that supports his objectives. And by the way, we need to talk about how was Twitter before Elon Musk purchased it. Before Musk purchased Twitter, Donald Trump was banned, as you may remember, from the platform due to his inflammatory rhetoric and engagement in online trolling. However, under Musk's control, X has become a political public sphere that openly favors Trump's campaign and maybe other politicians in other countries. As you know, Elon Musk also supports AfD in Germany and some others. His reinstatement, along with the broader rollback of content moderation policies, has transformed X into a platform where conspiracy theories and hate speech disseminate. For instance, imagine the AI-generated Gaza video featuring Trump's vision on Gaza. I'm sure that most of you watched it, which spread harmful rhetoric, would likely not have been allowed under Twitter's moderation policies. However, under Musk's leadership, X has taken a radically different stance, using free speech as a tool of control. And when it comes to the role of the governments, we need to talk about it. Beyond individual corporate figures, we must examine how state policies influence platform governance. Governments often pressure platforms to comply with national regulations, but this can quickly descend into a co-optation. In authoritarian regimes, laws against hate speech or false information are frequently weaponized to silence opposition and independent journalism. The European Union's Digital Services Act is often praised as a landmark regulation. It mandates greater transparency, requires platforms to take proactive measures against harmful content, and allow researchers access to platform data. However, while regulatory oversight is crucial, laws like the Digital Services Act do not address the deeper issue. Platforms are fundamentally designed to prioritize engagements, even when that engagement is fueled by outrage and division. The question is this: are platforms being regulated, or are they being co-opted? Regulation is necessary, but without democratic oversight, it risks reinforcing the problems and that we are trying to solve somehow. And this is digital capitalism. At its core, hate speech on social media is not just a moderation issue. It's a business model. Algorithms optimize for engagement, amplify divisive, emotionally charged content, because that content keeps users scrolling, clicking, and sharing, also reproducing hate speech. The financial logic of digital capitalism dictates that platforms profit from polarization. We can't not meaningfully address hate speech without acknowledging that it is an inevitable byproduct of a system where platform revenue is tied to user engagement. If hateful, conspirational, or misleading content drives traffic, then, believe me, it is inherently valuable to the companies that control this platform. To conclude, the question of defining hate speech cannot be separated from broader issue of power, who controls speech, who benefits from its regulation or lack of regulation, and who is left vulnerable when profit-driven platforms fail to act. The discontinuation of fact-checking on Meta, the ideological crusades of Elon Musk, and the regulatory gaps in the EU's approach all point to the same conclusion. Tech corporations and their executives exercise disproportionate influence over the democratic public sphere. The future of digital discourse cannot be left to the whims of tech oligarchs and their ever-changing priorities. If we truly want to combat hate speech, we must look beyond moderation policies, and urgently find a way to challenge profit-driven companies that dictate what constitutes acceptable speech, what is freedom of expression, according to them. The future of digital governance must not be left to uncountable billionaires. It must be shaped through democratic processes, strong regulatory oversight, and public ownership of critical digital infrastructures. Ending less threatens democracy, leaving speech in the hands of money and power, apparently people like Elon Musk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I remember that at the beginning of the internet, we were very hopeful. We were thinking that it will be the direct democracy and the freedom, the absolute freedom, etc. Apparently,
Digital
after
public sphere.
yes, after 13-something years, we see that it's not, unfortunately, the case. Yes, please.
It's mischievous of me, but I'm so sorry. Interrupting the moderator is a terrible thing to do. Speaking of freedom of speech, but I can't resist. You also set up something really interesting, which is that arguably now online spaces are more free, following that early vision of cyber utopianism from the 1990s, than they have been for a long time. The decision of the companies to withdraw from moderating does turn it into this sort of free-for-all. Of course, not entirely, but this is why I started by saying that they have kind of dumped this task of moderating into the laps of all of the rest of us. And I since it's been a sort of discouraging panel so far, that's not hopeless. There are thousands of people who've taken upon themselves, indeed, to respond on behalf of themselves and civil society. That's what we call counter speech. So just to say, you know, it is frightening, but it is also possibly an opportunity.
Of course, I certainly agree, but not by its own nature that the internet and the social media liberated us. That's what I was trying to say.
Absolutely, yeah.
And finally, we have dear Professor Zeynep Özarslan via Zoom. Thank you very much for your participation. She's from Çukurova University, and she's a researcher specializing in new media, artificial intelligence, creative and cultural industries, and cinema. Özarslan contributed to the report that you can see also during the cafe break that gave its name to this event with a chapter entitled Ethical Application of the Artificial Intelligence Technologies by Social Media Companies. And she will enlighten us about this subject also.
Good afternoon, thank you very much. Sorry, I can hear myself as well, so. Okay, so first I'd like to express my sincere regret that I cannot be with you in person today due to my ongoing research commitments in the UK. Nevertheless, I'm deeply grateful and for the opportunity to participate remotely. So I would also like to extend my thanks to Roundthink Foundation and the partners of this project for inviting me to this important panel. And thank you all for your presence and attention today. In my speech, I'll explore the ethical implications of using artificial intelligence to combat hate speech online. Despite participating remotely, I'm excited to engage with you all in a meaningful discussion on how we can develop more effective and ethically responsible solutions to address hate speech in today's world, actually. So hate speech is not a new concept. We know historically societies have always tackled with hatred, expressions of intolerance strategies. However, the emergence of digital technologies, especially social media and AI, has fundamentally altered the dynamics of how hate speech spreads and manifests itself. Social media platforms offer a powerful dual role. They amplify freedom of expression, allowing individuals worldwide to share ideas and engage in a dialogue. Yet simultaneously, they act as accelerators of hate speech. The digital environment makes it impossible for hate-filled messages to spread faster, wider, more anonymously than ever before. Scholars underscore this troubling development, pointing out how digital platforms have enabled hate speech to become instant, borderless, and often anonymous, intensifying both the reach and impact of hateful narratives. Today's hate speech often employs methods beyond traditional text-based communication, as it was discussed actually in a morning session. Sorry, not morning. In the UK, it was morning. So in the previous session, visual and multimedia formats, including memes, emojis, and videos, carry embedded hateful content that complicates detection. Furthermore, digital anonymity presents unique challenges. Fake accounts, automated bots, and deepfakes allow users to disseminate hate speech without fear of accountability. A notable example is the spread of deepfake technology, where realistic but fabricated videos of public figures or celebrities expressing hateful messages have been used to manipulate public opinion, incite violence, and promote polarization, as Yasemin, Professor Yasemin has also expressed that, gave some examples about these, how celebrities were used in such kind of context. Another dimension complicating hate speech in identification is the global nature of digital platforms, actually. Social media operates across numerous jurisdictions, each with its own legal and cultural definitions of hate speech. What is legally classified as hate speech in one country might be considered as free speech in another country. This variability in definitions creates significant practical challenges. Social media companies must devise complex moderation practices that balance global legal compliance with cultural sensitivity. Consequently, they rely heavily on AI technologies to manage this process at scale. Therefore, defining hate speech in the digital age requires continuous reflection, adaptation, and interdisciplinary collaboration. Now, I would like to proceed with the role of AI in hate speech detection. The rapid growth of digital communication, particularly through social media, has made human moderation alone insufficient to address hate speech effectively. Today, millions of messages circulate every second across platforms like Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok. Manually reviewing all these content is simply impossible. Consequently, artificial intelligence technologies have emerged as essential tools in managing the scale and complexity of online hate speech. As our professors, the team developed Pari, thanks to the tool in Turkish that works in Turkish as well. AI-driven methods, including machine learning and natural language processing, deep learning, have been adopted to detect, analyze, and flag harmful online content automatically. These technologies, for example, learn patterns from extensive data sets containing examples of previously identified hate speech, enabling rapid identification of similar instances in real time. Or they enhance these systems by analyzing language patterns, sentiment, and user interactions to interpret the meaning and context behind online messages more accurately. Despite these advances, AI detection systems used by social media corporations are far from perfect. One major limitation arises from the significant cultural and contextual variability in what constitutes hate speech, because different countries, cultures, and even sub-communities within the same society interpret hate speech differently, as we discussed in all panels today. AI systems often struggle to apply universal criteria effectively. For example, a phrase is considered offensive or hateful in one cultural or national context, may be interpreted as a legitimate form of social or political critique in another. Such differences mean AI systems trained without consideration of local nuances can misinterpret or overlook harmful content, raising both ethical and practical concerns. Moreover, AI-driven systems face difficulties accurately interpreting context. Algorithms may mistakenly flag harmful content as hate speech, or conversely, fail to recognize genuinely harmful content disguised through satire or sarcasm. These limitations underlie the critical need for culturally informed, context-sensitive AI systems. Thus, the challenge ahead for AI technology in combating hate speech lies not just in improving technical capacities, but also in ensuring systems are ethically designed with a deep awareness of linguistic, cultural, and contextual diversity. So this approach requires interdisciplinary collaboration among AI developers, ethicists, linguists, policymakers, and communities affected by hate speech, ensuring technological advancements align effectively with ethical and societal expectations. So the question is, what are these all ethical considerations? The deployment of AI tools to combat hate speech introduce some ethical complexities that we must navigate carefully. So artificial intelligence, while powerful, carries with the potential to unlimitedly reinforce societal biases or discrimination if implemented irresponsibly. Therefore, ethical considerations such as fairness, transparency, accountability, responsibility, and privacy must guide the design and deployment of these tools. Algorithmic fairness is an important concern, ethical concern. AI systems typically learn patterns from vast data sets, which means their effectiveness relies heavily on the quality and representativeness of these data sets. If the data used to train these systems is biased towards certain demographics, cultures, or languages, the resulting algorithms may unfairly target specific groups. A real-world example is the well-known case identified by Bulumni and Gebru, where facial recognition software for major technology companies disproportionately misidentified individuals from minority groups, illustrating how biased training data can lead to harmful discriminatory outcomes. I would like to give an example about this similar situation about the face recognition technologies that I have attended an event yesterday. It was about AI, responsible AI event. And one of the panelists had a slightly facial distortion. And she said that she cannot use the facial recognition technologies on her phone, or she has some problems when she went to at the airports because those facial recognition technologies do not identify her face because of the facial distortion. So the vulnerable groups as well can experience some negative consequences because of these technological because of the bias in these technologies. So similar issues apply to hate speech detection systems. If training data disproportionately represents certain groups negatively, AI systems could mistakenly target or silence those communities, reinforcing social inequalities rather than mitigating hate speech. Another ethical issue is transparency. Transparency should extend beyond simply explaining how AI algorithms function. It must encompass clear disclosure of what data is used, how moderation decisions are made, and the criteria underlying the decisions. Transparent systems help build public trust and confidence in AI-driven moderation processes. Another ethical issue is accountability and privacy. Social media companies should provide regular and open reports detailing their AI moderation practices and any decisions made by automated systems. Independent oversights involving diverse stakeholders, such as ethicists, technologists, policymakers, civil society organizations, and affected communities, should regularly audit these AI systems to ensure they are fair and equitable. And another crucial ethical concern is the inclusivity of representativeness of the data used in training AI systems. AI models frequently demonstrate monolingual biases, meaning they might perform poorly in detecting hate speech in languages or dialects not well represented in training data. For example, an AI tool primarily trained on English language content could struggle to accurately identify hate speech in Turkish or other less represented languages. This limitation could unintentionally perpetuate biases, creating unequal protection against hate speech for diverse global populations. Therefore, AI training data must include a diverse, culturally representative corpus. Such diversity can help prevent unintentional bias, ensuring AI systems can accurately detect hate speech across different languages, dialects, cultures, or contexts. Social media companies must prioritize data diversity, continuously update to reflect cultural and societal changes, and actively work to eliminate exclusionary or toxic elements with training data. However, we see that they generally fail in this context, or they just want to fail, maybe, as our panelists exemplified in their speech. Ultimately, ethical considerations are not merely theoretical. They directly impact the practical effectiveness and societal acceptance of AI technologies. So let me present some practical solutions, and then I will conclude. To ensure AI technologies effectively and ethically address the challenge of online hate speech, it is crucial to follow a comprehensive, multidimensional approach that carefully addresses several ethical issues identified here. Firstly, it is essential to integrate diverse and representative training data into AI models. Bias in AI frequently results from data sets that lack representation of multiple languages, cultures, or social groups. Furthermore, AI systems should proactively incorporate diverse dialects, regional expressions, and cultural references to ensure fair representation and effective moderation globally. By integrating such diverse data, AI models become better at distinguishing a genuine hate speech from culturally specific expressions. Secondly, AI systems must be developed and understand nuanced context effectively. Contextual analysis is critical because identical language can carry different implications depending on context. And practical advancements such as leveraging users' historical interactions, the social networks they engage with, or other contextual clues can help AI better recognize genuine hate speech while reducing false positiveness. Furthermore, transparency should be a cornerstone in deploying AI ethically. Transparency involves clearly explaining how AI systems operate, how content is flagged, reviewed, and moderated. Adopting regular transparency reports and openly accessible guidelines on AI moderation processes can significantly enhance public trust. Independent oversight bodies consisting diverse stakeholders such as ethicists, technologists, sociologists, NGOs, and civil society organizations should regularly audit these moderation systems to ensure fairness, accountability, and compliance with ethical guidelines. Another essential recommendation is to empower human moderation teams through AI assistance rather than replacement. AI should not fully automate moderation processes, but serve as supportive tools that help moderators perform their tasks more efficiently and accurately. And finally, cross-platform collaboration is also crucial. Hate speech and extremist content rarely remain confined in a single platform. Thus, consistent cooperation between social media companies, government institutions, and civil society can strengthen overall effectiveness. This will allow platforms to learn from each other's best practices, establish unified ethical standards, and coordinate collective responses for hate speech detection and moderation. In conclusion, artificial intelligence undeniably provides powerful tools to detect, analyze, and ultimately combat hate speech in digital environments. However, as we discussed today, technological capability alone is insufficient. The ethical implementation of AI is equally crucial to ensure that these technologies do not inadvertently contribute to existing inequalities or perpetuate bias. Ethical AI implementation demands rigorous attention to fairness, transparency, accountability, and privacy. Without these guiding principles, AI systems risk reinforcing discriminatory practices, silencing legitimate speech, or failing to protect vulnerable groups. Therefore, it is imperative for companies and institutions deploying AI systems to adopt transparent moderation policies, engage in consistent ethical audits, and collaborate independent oversight groups. And cross-platform collaboration can help harmonize efforts, maximizing the impact of AI solutions globally. Ultimately, addressing hate speech is not solely a technological or ethical challenge. It is fundamentally a societal responsibility. It requires sustained commitment from all stakeholders, policymakers, technology companies, academics, civil society organizations, and every individual user. As technology continues to evolve rapidly, so too must our ethical frameworks and definitions adapt dynamically to these challenges. In closing, the promise of AI technologies in creating safer online environments can be fully realized only through continuous interdisciplinary cooperation, vigilance, and ethical awareness. Thank you very much for listening.